These are 10 Betty Crocker recipes that once defined American home cooking and then quietly disappeared. They were not experiments or trends. They were trusted meals, cooked weekly, and written into the margins of family cookbooks. Each recipe solved a problem: how to stretch meat, how to feed a household, how to make something modest feel complete. Over time, these dishes vanished as kitchens modernized and tastes shifted. What remained were names people recognized, but no longer remembered how to make. This video brings those recipes back, exactly as they were intended. Not updated, not reinvented, preserved. By the end, you will understand why these meals mattered, why they worked, and why they disappeared. If you care about the food that shaped American families before convenience replaced tradition, this is worth your time. Let us begin. Salmon loaf was once a quiet staple of mid-century American kitchens, especially in homes that relied on Betty Crocker cookbooks for dependable meals. It took something humble, canned salmon, and turned it into a centerpiece that felt planned, filling, and respectable. The recipe appeared again and again in post-war editions because it solved several problems at once. Fresh fish was expensive or unavailable inland. Canned salmon was shelf-stable, affordable, and dependable. Mixed with eggs, breadcrumbs, milk, and simple seasoning, the loaf stretched a single can into a full family dinner. What mattered most was structure. This dish was baked, sliced, and served like meat. In an era shaped by rationing memories and careful budgeting, food that held its shape carried meaning. A clean slice on a plate suggested order, care, and effort even when money was tight. Salmon loaf was often served with white sauce, peas, or mashed potatoes. These were not sides chosen for flavor alone. They completed the meal visually and nutritionally, reinforcing the idea that dinner should look finished. Families trusted this recipe. It was predictable. Children recognized it. Leftovers reheated well. That reliability made it powerful. Over time, the loaf disappeared. Convenience foods replaced scratch cooking. Canned fish lost status. Presentation shifted toward speed instead of form. What remains is a recipe that tells the truth about its era. Salmon loaf was never meant to impress guests. It was meant to feed people consistently, calmly, and without waste. If you stay with this series, each recipe will reveal how ordinary meals carried families through change, using simple ingredients, steady routines, and quiet confidence that dinner still mattered every single night. Scalloped turkey was a practical answer to an American question that appeared every year after a holiday meal. What comes next? In Betty Crocker kitchens, leftovers were not an afterthought. They were planned. This dish transformed cooked turkey into something new without pretending it was different. Thinly sliced potatoes, milk, butter, and flour formed a gentle sauce that carried the meat. Everything was layered carefully, baked slowly, and served hot from one dish. The value of scalloped turkey was balance. Protein was stretched. Potatoes added weight. Milk added comfort. Nothing was wasted, and nothing felt skimpy. For families watching budgets, that balance mattered. The recipe also respected time. It could be assembled earlier in the day, baked once, and fed several people without additional effort. In homes where cooking was daily work, reliability was a form of relief. Scalloped turkey appeared most often in the 1940s and 1950s, when home cooks were encouraged to be efficient, orderly, and resourceful. The casserole fit that philosophy perfectly. It used familiar ingredients and rewarded patience rather than skill. Children accepted it easily because the flavors were mild and consistent. Adults trusted it because it stretched a single roast into multiple meals. That trust kept it in rotation for years. As food culture shifted, casseroles lost favor. Leftovers became disposable. Speed replaced intention. Scalloped turkey quietly faded. What remains is a lesson from a different kitchen rhythm. This dish was not about novelty. It was about continuity. If you keep watching, you will see how recipes like this shaped habits, reduced waste, and turned ordinary leftovers into dependable dinners that carried families through the week. Each page reminds us that careful cooking once meant responsibility, patience, and care, values that still matter when food is remembered rather than replaced today at home kitchens everywhere. Chicken à la king was a symbol of quiet confidence in mid-century American kitchens. It sounded refined, but it was built from familiar parts and dependable technique, exactly the kind of recipe Betty Crocker promoted. The dish combined cooked chicken with mushrooms, green peppers, and a creamy white sauce, then served it over toast, rice, or pastry shells. Nothing was hidden. Every ingredient was visible, measured, and purposeful. This recipe mattered because it elevated leftovers without disguising them. Cooked chicken from a previous meal became something structured and intentional. The sauce unified the dish, turning separate elements into a single, composed dinner. In the 1940s and 1950s, chicken à la king often appeared when families wanted a meal that felt special without being expensive. It was appropriate for company, yet practical enough for a weeknight. That balance gave it lasting power. Presentation played an important role. Served neatly over toast points, the dish suggested care and order. It signaled that the meal had been planned, not improvised, even when it relied on what was already on hand. Children accepted it because the flavors were mild and familiar. Adults valued it because it stretched meat and rewarded preparation. One pot produced multiple servings, and leftovers reheated smoothly. Over time, the dish faded. Cream sauces fell out of favor. Toast-based dinners disappeared. Convenience foods replaced composed plates. What remains is a recipe that reflects an era when food carried quiet formality. Chicken à la king was not about luxury. It was about assurance. As this series continues, each dish reveals how structure, presentation, and restraint once defined American cooking. These meals did more than feed families. They reinforced routine, dignity, and the idea that dinner deserved intention, even on ordinary nights. Porcupine meatballs earned their name not from novelty, but from appearance. As they baked, grains of rice pushed through the surface of the meat, creating a spiked texture that families immediately recognized. It was memorable, filling, and practical. This recipe appeared in Betty Crocker cookbooks during a period when ground meat needed to stretch further than it naturally could. Rice was mixed directly into the meatballs, absorbing liquid as they cooked and expanding the portion without weakening the structure. The meatballs were simmered or baked in a tomato-based sauce, which served two purposes. It added moisture, and it ensured that nothing dried out during cooking. Every element had a function. Nothing was decorative. Porcupine meatballs mattered because they solved scarcity quietly. 1 pound of meat could feed a full family. The rice added substance, the sauce added comfort, and the finished dish looked complete on the plate. Children were fascinated by the texture. Adults appreciated the economy. The flavors were familiar, steady, and reliable. Served over mashed potatoes or alone in a bowl, the meal felt sufficient. In the 1940s and 1950s, recipes like this reflected a mindset shaped by restraint. Food was expected to work. Appearance mattered, but usefulness mattered more. As food abundance increased, rice-stretched meat dishes fell out of favor. Convenience products removed the need for careful extension. Porcupine meatballs slowly disappeared from weekly rotation. What remains is a clear record of creative necessity. This dish did not pretend to be refined. It was honest about its purpose. Continuing this series reveals how American kitchens once adapted with precision. These recipes balanced ingenuity and restraint, showing how simple techniques sustained households and turned limitation into routine nourishment that felt intentional, dependable, and complete at the dinner table. Tuna noodle ring was a clever solution for mid-century American families who wanted a complete, filling meal without waste. Its circular shape made it visually striking, while its ingredients remained simple, affordable, and reliable, exactly the kind of recipe Betty Crocker valued. Canned tuna combined with cooked noodles, a creamy sauce, and sometimes vegetables, was arranged in a ring-shaped mold, then baked until firm. Once inverted onto a serving platter, the ring held its shape, presenting a neat, structured meal that looked intentional. The recipe mattered because it stretched protein efficiently. Tuna was inexpensive and shelf-stable, noodles were filling, and the creamy binder ensured the dish remained cohesive. Nothing was wasted, and leftovers maintained their form. Families appreciated the flexibility. Children were drawn to the unusual ring shape, while adults valued the practicality. It could be prepared ahead of time, baked when needed, and served without fuss, which made it ideal for both weeknight dinners and small gatherings. In the 1950s, presentation and predictability were equally important. Meals that appeared composed and complete reinforced the sense that the household was managed with care. The tuna noodle ring embodied this philosophy perfectly. Over time, this dish disappeared from popular cooking. Packaged meals, frozen dinners, and changing tastes replaced the need for molded casseroles. The once familiar recipe became a relic of an era when ingenuity and economy were inseparable from daily cooking. What remains is a recipe that reflects practical elegance. Tuna noodle ring was not about extravagance. It was about feeding a family efficiently, reliably, and attractively. Following this series, viewers will see how meals like this shaped routines, preserved ingredients, and provided comfort. These recipes remind us that American home cooking once relied on creativity, careful planning, and a quiet sense of pride in making modest ingredients feel complete and presentable at the table. Chipped beef on toast, often referred to as SOS, was a staple in mid-century American kitchens, particularly in households that valued efficiency and economy. The recipe transformed dried, salted beef into a creamy, savory meal that could stretch across several servings. The dish began by rehydrating thin slices of dried beef in a white sauce made from butter, flour, and milk. Once combined, the mixture was spooned generously over toasted bread. The result was warm, filling, and reliable, providing both protein and comfort with minimal effort. This recipe mattered because it addressed multiple challenges. Dried beef had long shelf life, making it accessible even in regions where fresh meat was scarce. The white sauce added creaminess, flavor, and bulk, allowing families to serve fewer ingredients while still providing a complete meal. Children often accepted it without complaint due to its mild, creamy flavor. Adults appreciated its predictability. The dish could be prepared quickly, required few additional components, and left little for waste. In the 1940s and 1950s, chipped beef on toast represented a mindset that valued frugality and consistency. Meals were expected to be practical, manageable, and satisfying. The dish's name, often whispered with humor, belied its utility and reliability in daily family routines. Over time, convenience foods and evolving tastes caused this recipe to fade. Its combination of dried meat and white sauce became less appealing to modern palates, and it slowly vanished from American tables. What remains is a glimpse into the resourcefulness of home cooks who relied on structure, planning, and simple ingredients to feed their families. Chipped beef on toast was never about luxury. It was about providing dependable nourishment with care and efficiency. By revisiting recipes like this, viewers will understand how ordinary meals once carried families through the week, balancing economy, flavor, and consistency, and leaving a quiet but lasting mark on American food history. Spanish rice with ground beef was a practical and flavorful solution for mid-century American kitchens seeking affordable, complete meals. It combines simple ingredients, ground beef, rice, onions, bell peppers, and tomato sauce, into a one-dish dinner that stretched ingredients and satisfied appetites. The recipe mattered because it balanced nutrition, economy, and convenience. Ground beef provided protein, rice added substance, and vegetables contributed color and mild flavor. Together, they created a dish that could feed a family efficiently without sacrificing heartiness. In the 1950s, home cooks relied on recipes like this to manage time and resources. Everything could be cooked in a single skillet or casserole, reducing cleanup and simplifying preparation. The dish was forgiving. It could be adjusted based on what was available, making it ideal for households of varying sizes. Children accepted it because the flavors were familiar and approachable. Adults valued its versatility. It could serve as a weekday dinner, a casual gathering meal, or even a portable dish for lunchboxes. Leftovers reheated easily, maintaining both flavor and texture. Presentation was simple but intentional. Bright tomatoes and green peppers added visual appeal, reinforcing the idea that even modest ingredients could produce a balanced, attractive meal. This approach reflected a larger philosophy of the era. Meals were meant to be functional, wholesome, and reassuring. As American kitchens evolved, convenience foods and processed alternatives reduced the need for such dishes. Recipes like Spanish rice with ground beef gradually disappeared from cookbooks, leaving only memories of practical ingenuity. What remains is a testament to the resourcefulness and care embedded in mid-century home cooking. This recipe was not about extravagance. It was about providing steady nourishment, maximizing available ingredients, and creating meals that felt complete and dependable. By exploring recipes like this, viewers can understand how families once combined creativity, frugality, and taste to sustain households, reminding us that even ordinary dishes can hold historical and emotional significance at the dinner table. Pineapple cheese casserole was a quintessential mid-century American dish that balanced sweet, savory, and creamy textures in a single, approachable preparation. Featured in Betty Crocker cookbooks of the 1950s, it combined canned pineapple, grated cheese, and a starch, often breadcrumbs or cooked rice, into a baked casserole that appeared on many family tables. The recipe mattered because it transformed pantry staples into a visually appealing and filling dish. Pineapple added natural sweetness and moisture, cheese contributed richness and flavor, and the base provided substance. Together, the combination created a dish that satisfied multiple roles: side, centerpiece, or even a light main course. In its era, the casserole reflected both economy and presentation. Canned ingredients were reliable, shelf-stable, and easy to prepare, while the finished dish looked structured and intentional. Families appreciated meals that could feed several people with minimal effort and minimal expense. Children often found it approachable because of the sweet and creamy flavors, while adults valued its simplicity and versatility. It could accompany meats, stand alone, or be reheated without losing texture or taste. The dish exemplified the balance mid-century cooks sought between convenience and care. Over time, taste changed. Sweet savory casseroles fell out of favor, and more contemporary side dishes replaced them. Pineapple cheese casserole gradually disappeared from weekly menus and mainstream cookbooks, leaving only memories of its unique combination of flavors and textures. What remains is a record of resourcefulness and aesthetic intention. The dish was not designed to impress gourmet palates. It was intended to be reliable, filling, and satisfying while making efficient use of available ingredients. By revisiting this recipe, viewers can understand how American families once combined ingenuity, simplicity, and flavor to create meals that were both practical and memorable. It reminds us that even small, forgotten dishes carry lessons about tradition, economy, and the quiet care that shaped mid-century home cooking. Hot milk sponge cake was a delicate dessert that held a special place in mid-century American kitchens. Featured in Betty Crocker cookbooks of the 1940s and 1950s, it relied on simple ingredients, eggs, sugar, flour, and hot milk, to create a soft, airy cake that felt light yet satisfying. The recipe mattered because it was accessible and reliable. The technique of incorporating hot milk allowed the batter to rise without elaborate equipment or advanced skills. Families could achieve a tender, uniform texture consistently, making it ideal for both everyday desserts and special occasions. This cake reflected the philosophy of the era, elegance without extravagance. A single pan could produce a dessert that looked impressive on the table while using ingredients that were likely already in the pantry. It demonstrated that home cooks could create refined results through careful technique rather than expensive additions. Children enjoyed its soft, sweet texture, and adults valued its simplicity and versatility. It could be served plain, dusted with powdered sugar, or paired with fruit or custard. Its subtle flavor allowed it to complement other dishes without overwhelming them. Over time, preferences shifted toward richer, more complex desserts, and hot milk sponge cake gradually fell out of favor. Convenience baked goods and prepackaged treats replaced it in many households, leaving this light, reliable cake largely forgotten. What remains is a testament to thoughtful, purposeful cooking. Hot milk sponge cake was not designed for spectacle. It was intended to provide a dependable, tender dessert that could be enjoyed regularly while demonstrating care and skill in the kitchen. By revisiting recipes like this, viewers can appreciate the balance mid-century home cooks struck between simplicity, elegance, and reliability. Each forgotten dessert offers insight into how American families once approached cooking with intention, producing meals and treats that were practical, comforting, and quietly impressive.